So I'm Elaine Kalynchuk, and I'm the president of the local Ukraine Genealogy Group, Edmonton and Area Society. And we have now over 400 members. A couple weeks ago when I sent the information to this place about my background, we were at about 350. But what I had done was I posted, we have an upcoming Zoom session, and I posted it on various different Facebook Ukrainian genealogy groups, and got 50 new members.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, but so what it is it's people whose families initially settled in Alberta or Saskatchewan as far as a part of the first wave, and since then they've moved all over the world. And so my background, I've volunteered my whole life, so I sit on a couple boards in the local Ukrainian Canadian community. I also run a popular Tracing Your Roots Ukrainian Canadian Genealogy, and that's hitting close to 9,000. And that's only in 2.5 years that I've had it posted. I launched it 2.5 years ago at the Beggarville Festival, and and so far my articles, I've had about 26 articles, and they're all of doing research in Canada. So this upcoming year I'm going to start posting articles about, because I made 4 trips to Ukraine, and I've been in the archives, and I've been in the registry offices, and I've gone through paid researchers, and I've met with family and gone with them to get information. So I'll be writing articles about my trips to Ukraine and my different research projects. I've also
Is there a specific area in Ukraine or
all
all over?
I've done out of Borschtysky district, so that's in Ternopil Oblast, and then Kitsman district in Chernivtsi Oblast. So on my baba's side, the family, they're from Bukovina, and then on my father's side, Kalynchuks and Stetskos are from Borschtysky district. And the other side is Polyuk and Chachik, or Chuk, or
Elaine, I have a question. What drove you to write more than one book
well, I
on the
because
same topic?
But there's
Oh,
three
because-
families, his family.
yeah, so
On the same family?
yeah, well, 2 of them were the same family. So what happened was 31 years ago, I did my first, in 1993, I did my first book and put on a family reunion. And then over the years, you know, more kids are born and grandkids and everything. So everybody's been bugging me since I retired 4 years ago. So end of June last year, I put on a second reunion. And of course, I had to update, do a second volume of my book because of the last 30 years of research, right?
Oh.
Yeah, and all that. And then the third book I did was for a client. So, and that's where I'll show an example with her. Her family was Toms, and they were out of Poland, which was interesting because if you're doing research out of Poland that used to be part of Galicia, those records are a lot easier. They go back 3 generations, and they're in Latin. And they're all digitalized, and they're online. So with her doing her book, again, it was a thick book that I did on her. It was 1 trip to Salt Lake City for a week. And I was able to get all the information together.
Interesting.
You could be more Salt Lake City.
I don't know, could be.
And so, just a little bit of a recap for starting your genealogy. It's write down what you already know, then talk to your older relatives, start building your family tree online, plan what you would like to learn. Maybe you want to take a beginner's course, or maybe you want to take a session online about doing DNA analysis, or etc. like that. Consider doing a DNA test, because that's where you can have matches with other family, and I'll show you later on, is that especially when you're getting started, you may come across somebody who's already done a whole bunch of information, and they then share it with you. Consider joining Ancestry, Family Search, MyHeritage, And again, that's all, because each of those sites has, it'll show up hints, and then it'll show up potential homestead records, census records, matches, etc. like that. Learn about additional available records. And then locating your village in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So I'll be talking about Galicia and Bukovina. And here, where the village is down there, that's for the Kalynchuk and Stetsko side. And the for my Baba side, it's just the district south. So they're across the river from each other. How to locate your ancestors' village. It might be as easy as looking at a book. So for example, for me, this book. So in this book, actually, I was lucky that both sides of my family happened to be in there. And it listed the village, plus a whole bunch of other information. I can pass it around if you want to look at
So
it.
would the family name be in here, is that correct?
Yeah, it's by family name. And this book, Dr. K's book, exists for Saskatchewan and also for Manitoba. And then there's a fourth book that's for Canada.
The same author?
Yeah, same author, yeah. And then another place to look is proof of age documents. So if your ancestor lived till they were 85, way back then, you needed to reach 85 before you could collect pension. And then what they had to do was they had to go to their local priest and get him to send a letter to a priest in the old country to then go to the archives and fill out a form verifying when you were born, when you were baptized, who your parents are, who your godparents are, etc. like that. And I'll show an example of that too.
Can we take pictures of your slides?
That's why I'm going to email it to everybody. But yeah, you can take pictures if you want to. Yeah,
Is that correct?
that's fine.
Your father's grandfather.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then another place you can find the village is on birth, marriage, or death records. So one of the things is that the later records have more detail. But again, it's people remember less. So the earlier records, people remember more, but there's not as much written down. And I'll show an example of that. Another way you may find out what the village is through an older family member or even a neighbor, because I was mentioning to somebody earlier, people tended to settle in the same district. So initially my family all came here in 1897 and settled in the Wostock area. And then a bunch of them also then moved to Premila because they were looking for more land because they had boys. They had 5 boys. And there was no longer new homesteads to take out in the Wostock area. It was all taken up, right? So then they moved to Premila. But you'll find is that out at Premila, same thing. It's Stetskos, Gotchkos, Kalynchuks, and it's all the same families, and they all trace back to the same little village in Ukraine. Now, if it's harder for you to find your ancestral village, you have a couple options. One is you can check on Ancestry through the Hammonburg departure passenger list, because that lists the village. But with that, you have to know the correct misspelling of the surname. And I'll show you an example of that on how bad the first name of my great-grandfather, his name is Eco, but you'll see what the example shows. The other thing is you can take a DNA test, and again, I'll show an example of that. So with the haplogroups, it's through, a female is through your female line. So with me, my haplogroup is Irish because my grandmother was Irish from Northern Ireland, and her mother was Irish too. Whereas on the Kalynchuk side, I got my brother to do his DNA on 23andMe, and then that's my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, and so on through the male line. So again, if you are not able to find the village, find a distant cousin who is directly related to you, and maybe they know the village. And that, again, I'll show an example where in my family, we were able to do that. So here's a capture from that brown book about my two sets of great-grandparents. And it's got a lot of detail. So it tells you the ship, it tells you the homestead records, it tells you naturalization. And see, again, it says not listed on the top one for Elaine Kalynchuk. It says not listed on the same quarter section in 1923. That was because they moved to Wostock near Elk Point. So I know that. With Partami Polyu, he had only one son. So he remained in the Smoky Lake area because a lot of people from Bukavina settled around Smoky Lake area, whereas the ones from Galicia settled more towards Star and Wostock, Andrew area.
Sorry, Elaine, you mentioned Elk Point. Are you saying that there's a Wostock both in Star and the Elk Point?
No. They lived first in the Wostock area,
Right.
and then because they had sons,
They have to move.
they had to pack up and move, and it's a couple hours drive towards the Saskatchewan border.
Okay.
And the community is called Primula or Northern Valley, Graz.
Okay.
It's all that area.
Okay.
Yeah.
What, I would ask, because
Yeah.
I'm sure you mentioned, that you said the word Elk Point.
Oh, it's near Elk Point, yeah.
Is Elk Point east?
It's near St.
A
Paul.
little north and a little east, yeah.
Little north and east? My mistake, thank you.
Yeah.
You're right,
Yeah.
then I got you.
See, again, so there's kind of like the block of where all the Ukrainians were settling, and then what happened is the ones who had lots of sons, they had to move outside of that block, to find new homesteads. And that's what happened with my one side of my family. And same thing happened on the Stetsko side. It was grandsons, a whole pile of grandsons. So that's why they moved. So the first image is the proof of age for Anastasia. And see right there is the village. And then the village is here then. And then here is the district. And there is the oblast. And one thing, if you know, is this is in 1938. What is so important about this? The information on this document, if I tried to make an inquiry to Ukraine today, I would not be able to get it because the Germans destroyed the records for Borshchev. So all this, knowing all this information about her, this is her father, and then here's her mother, and then her godparents. And then here it lists their house number, and here it lists when she was born, and here when she was baptized. And then here, the second one is the death record for the same lady, for Anastasia, and this was done by my grandfather, Harry Kalynchuk. But if you know, with time, people forget things. So he got it right that they are from the Borshchev district, and he got it right, the grandfather was Vasil, and later he went as William or Bill Stetsko. That's correct. But for the grandmother, because what happened was one of her daughters, Anna, her name was Dorka, but one of her daughters, Anna, lost her husband and a whole bunch of her kids in 1918 flu. And she lived near Beaver Hill, near the Borshchev Cemetery that's northeast of Edmonton. So when her husband passed away in 1916, she up and packed up and moved to Beaver Hill to help her daughter Anna. So he rather than putting Dorka, he put Anna, who was actually his aunt. Yeah. And then see here, she was born on February 9th, whereas here he thinks that she was born on February 25th.
So how did you find your birth record?
Provincial Archives. So there, you can do it,
A word card?
yeah,
Okay.
but they only have those records if your ancestor lived up to the age of 85 and applied for federal pension.
Pension, right.
Yeah, because they needed to show proof of their age. And then the second document they got was their homestead documents, because then they had to prove how many years that they were living in Canada. Because even today, any immigrants that come to Canada have to live here a minimum of 10 years before they can collect pension.
Okay.
Yeah. And then here's an example of the Hammondburg, the ship record. You can click on it up here and see the actual record, but one of the columns towards the end there, it lists the village. And that's in Polish. And that's another thing, that's why it's important to keep all the different versions, all the different spellings of the name. Because in Ukraine, the way the name is said is Kalynchuk, Zuk at the end, Zuk at the end, rather than Chak, right? And then, but does that look like Eco?
Jacob?
Yeah, so that's where, what you can do is you can type in the part of the name and then put a star, which is called a wild card, and then it'll pull up. So this is another way to try and find the name of your family village, is through the Hammondburg passenger list. Or another thing is that if you can't find your family member, try one of their kids. If one of the kids were with them on the ship, try their name. Or if you knew, in my case, 26 family members all traveled together, because what happened was the two-time great-grandfather, he made sure when he was coming to Canada, he was bringing everybody. So he brought all his married daughters with their husbands, the grandkids, and his 14-year-old daughter that was still living at home. He packed up everybody and brought them all over. And that's why with our family we were lucky, was because they all settled initially together and then they moved and settled together. And when I started doing family research, all I had to do was go visit them. And in the early 1960s, that's when two of the brothers made their first trip to Ukraine. They went into the village in about 1963. And I didn't go until my first trip was 1998, and then 2002, then 2017 and 2019. But they have,
Did you go to Bookvina as well?
oh yeah, okay.
Elaine, how old was your grandfather when he came to Canada?
My grandfather was born here.
No, I mean the person that brought the whole family.
Oh,
All of his sons and daughters and husbands, daughters, husbands.
yeah, he was born in the early 1800s, because, yeah, he was, or mid 1800s, like, yeah.
Well, if he had that many daughters, he must have at least been mid-30s or 40s
Oh, yeah,
when he came.
yeah. But no, he came here with, believe it or not, well, his wife was only 16 when they got married. They came here as great-grandparents. So that, like I say, so
He was
it's a
older.
huge, it was, yeah, they were both older people, but she was, again, a lot younger. That's why she was able to have like 14 kids or something.
Right.
And then what happened, they only had one son, and it was all daughters, but that one son then had numerous grandsons.
Okay.
And so, and in fact, a couple of the boys had to stay back because they had to serve their 3 years military service in the Austrian army
Yeah.
before they could come over here. But
So we mentioned that there's, that most of the family that came from Bukovina in the 1800s, late 1800s, did they catch the same ship or not necessarily?
most of them did.
Okay.
Only a couple of them that had to stay back to do military service. And then what they did was they married a local girl from the village and then brought her too.
Okay.
So they did their service in the army, and then married a local girl and then brought her to Canada. with them.
Elaine, I thought the service was 2 years, not 3. Do you know that for sure?
I think it was 3.
Was it? Okay, because I was on.
But again, it depends on what ranking
Oh,
it is.
maybe.
So this is another interesting way, and this is through 23andMe. And so what I had explained is with the haplogroup, it runs through either the male line or the female line. So my brother went and did it, and we got the haplogroup for our family. And then on the side column under DNA, the DNA page, it has where you can do a search. And all you do is type in this code. And what I got was this guy. Well, I'm looking, that's not Kalynchuk. So I contacted him and found out he changed his last name because he joined the U.S. Army. And his father happens to be Kalynchuk and straight from Ukraine, from the village. So again, that was another way I was able to confirm that my family is from that particular village. I was able to do it from Dr. K's book, and I was able to do it through the proof of age document for my two-time great-grandmother, and I was also able to do it through DNA to confirm the village.
So the haplogroups, that identifies what your nationality is that kind of what it is? Or not necessarily?
Yeah, it does. So like, for example, this haplogroup,
Yes.
I happen to be lucky enough that this goes back to the Vikings.
Oh, wow, look at that.
So that's what, I can't wait to go back to Ukraine and to do research in the archives and everything like that. Because again, my family, all the proof of the documents that I have, they didn't move to that village until the mid-1800s. They came from elsewhere. And then also on one of the DNA sites, it shows the clusters of where your DNA is
Yes.
back in Ukraine. And the darker it is, that means that's where you have more. And mine shows heading all the way up to,
Baltic.
yeah, or to
Russia maybe, or?
to Russia, where the
Yeah.
Vikings came from. And it's right the path where they traveled from where they were in Russia to where Kiev, and then came down into Western Ukraine.
So that's where your red-headed freckle uncle came from.
Yes, that's right.
And now with, then once you have the name of your village, I suggest reading some books on the Austro-Hungarian Empire and also on Galicia and Bukovina. That'll really help you with doing further research in that, because you need to understand what was kind of going on at the time. That like one presentation that I had watched about a year and a half ago, the guy, when he went to Ukraine, he didn't go to just the district where his family was from. Like initially you go to the registry office, the RAGs, right? And you have to get somebody local to go with you because foreigners can't make inquiries. So what you do is you find somebody in the village with the same surname who agrees. You take your passport and they take their passport. You go there, they fill out their name at the top, and then you fill out your details. As long as you've got, like I had a family tree all listed out, and it showed how I was related to this gentleman in the village. And for $16, they did a whole bunch of research for me. On the Kalynchuk side, it was about 11 and a half pages typed, and whereas on the Polyuk side, it was about 5 or 6 pages. And then with the knowing the village, there's a really good gazetteer from Brian Mamius. And I've got one of the earlier versions, but it's got it listed again, whether you're looking for the Polish spelling of the name or the Jewish or etc. like that. Throughout it, it's German, because there was also, remember, German colonies in the area.
That's right.
Yeah. And so what this will tell you is what parishes. So for Roman Catholic versus Greek Catholic versus Orthodox. And then here the last one is, there is 2 sets of like encyclopedias kind of. They're done on each oblast. And they have a set here that will tell you the historical information on the village. So if you know the village, you can find out when it was first created in the 1600s, and who was a former Polish landlord, and what industries they had, and, you know,
Right.
all, what famous people came from the village that went on to become artists or singers or, you know, that kind of stuff. And then here, like the borders changed many times. So one thing to do is to get familiar with the changing of the borders and that. And there is a few different books and that list the information. Like this is one I got out of Ukraine. When I go to Ukraine, I tend to go to the bookstores.
That's a good idea. It's a good
Yeah.
advice.
And then also, like, I put on a display table at the summer festivals, and the biggest thing last year people were asking for were maps, because I had a map of Ukraine in English and a map in Ukrainian. So the newcomers were all excited. They were putting pins on the map on where they were from, and then the Canadians. So the map that was in English, the Canadians was primarily all Western Ukraine with a handful out of Kiev area, whereas the recent settlers, they're all from Eastern Ukraine, Southern Ukraine, and then, of course, some from Kiev, and then a few from Western Ukraine. Again, the ones coming from Western Ukraine is because they have family, that a lot of them come here. And this is why I asked everybody for their email, because with all these links and that, I'll send you an email and you'll have that information. One really good map collection is at the Provincial Archives. It's the 1900 Austrian map. And that one, they're big maps. And I purchased a whole set of them, about more than 20 of them, and got them all laminated. And then about 10 years ago, I donated them all to the Ukrainian village, because that was part of the genealogy project they had there. And since then, Radomir has retired, and so everything's been donated. So these maps are at the Provincial Archives. I encourage people to ask them, can you please catalog them and move them up front? And the reason for that is because these are the detailed maps that include the little villages that no longer exist. So somebody may have a village, and they check on Google Maps or a couple other sources, and they can't find it. They can't find it. But if this map set lists all the villages from that time period. And here there is a couple current online sources where you can find information. Again, you know, travel group, you know, because they're focusing on people traveling to Ukraine and then taking them out to the village or doing family research inquiries, etc. For this here, again, it's up to the volunteers. So that's why some of the areas there's more information, and then other areas it's kind of lacking. You just need some keen people who are willing to add the information. And then here, if you're looking on Google Maps, list your village, the oblast, and then Ukraine, and you'll get it. Because, like, don't list the district, because the districts a few years ago changed. So that'll kind of mix up your search. This is a map that a lot of people see. And here's Bukovina, and then here's in Galicia. So you see up here Polish, and then Ukrainians, and then down in here Romanian. And then there was overlaps. And then again throughout the region there was also communities, different ethnic groups. I like collecting a lot of maps that have with the rail lines, because I'm always curious on how did they get from the village to Germany, to Ammenberg, you know? And so on my Baba side of the family, I was lucky enough when I made my last trip to Ukraine, I had a tour guide give me a tour of the city. And he took me to there's a building that looks like a ship, and down on the right-hand side, he said that at the bottom there, that's where the old train or the ticket office was. So I'm standing there, I says, when was this cobblestone laid? He says, I don't know, early 1800s, and I go, my great-grandparents were standing on the same cobblestone as me, and I'm looking out at where they probably went to get their ticket. And then this is from Brian's book, and this shows you, for example, the villages in Polish. And there's Borszczów, and then this will tell me at the end a map on where it's located. And then here's the Polish, or the Roman Catholic parish, and then the Greek Catholic. Oh. And then, I was going to tell you, another thing is that I've become friends with, or registered on some of the Facebook groups in Ukrainian. So this is an example of the Borszczów page. And I find out that they're publishing a 2-volume set on the history of the Borszczów region. So guess what? My next trip to Ukraine, I'm going to the Borszczów Museum to buy the first volume, and hopefully maybe they might have the second volume done by then.
So you must be able to read Ukrainian then.
I use Google Translate on my phone and that, so. But it's interesting is that they see me so often. I'll show in a few minutes a picture of the history book of the village, and there's 3 people who authored the book, and the guy is the one retired school teacher. He's determined that I'm selling the book because I go there and ask for 5 copies. But the reason is that I end up in contact with so many cousins that say, oh, I want that book, because it's got lots of old pictures in it. And again, once you know how to spell the names in Ukrainian, it's easy to find them in the book. Yeah, and here's some. So this is for the village that is in Borszczów, and then this is the one that's in Bukovina. And this gentleman is actually a cousin. When I go to Ukraine, I stay at his son's house. And then if you're ready then to start inquiring for your archival information records out of Ukraine, first place is check family search. Because if it's been digitalized, it's way easier to access that information, even from your own computer, or maybe to have to go to an affiliated library. You can either go to the Alberta Genealogy Society, they have the license on their computers, or you can go 2 times a week. The Riverbend location is open to the public. So it's one afternoon and then one evening. And again, they have direct access to all the information in Salt Lake City. So there's certain documents based on what the agreement was made between the archives and Family Search, that some of them, you could only view them at an affiliated library.
Like Riverbend.
Yeah, yeah. And then the most recent stuff is still at the Civil Registry Office. Again, when I got my information, that was like 25 years ago. So I think by now they've filled the book. Because again, it's a smaller village. And then after that, it's passed on to the state archives. And then at the Central State Historical Archives of Ukraine and Lviv, that's where they have one set of the cadastral maps. The other set of cadastral maps is in the Oblast, so that's in Ternopil Oblast. It was in my trip in 2002. He had all these maps all spread out on the floor, and I'm like looking, what's that about? And here, like 25 years later, I'm like, oh, why didn't I take that more serious? Why didn't I take pictures? Because now I know what it was that he was trying to show me. But at least I know where those maps are. So this is where, for example, I have the email address, the website, and then the Holocaust project that gives the background on the archives. And what's really good about that, it's in English, and it tells you, it gives hints, like, so they may have a certain collection that another archives doesn't have, or they may have records that go back further. So that's why it's good to check out these articles. And one thing to note is that with the Central State Historical Archives of Ukraine in Kiev and Lviv, there's 2 websites. So sometimes if you just do a search by the name, you'll get the old website. But you want to make sure that you've got the new website. Because at the other one will say at the beginning, it'll say old and then dot. And then this is for under the area that is now in Poland. And here's an example where I was saying the 3rd family history book that I had done was for the Tom's family. And that was, at that time it was on microfilm. So you had a reader, so in the one room you had to find it, then you had to pull it off the machine, carry it across the room to the other room to then print off a copy of it. And I was like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But again, it was because for this region, excellent records. And here's an example with the family right here. And it lists 3 generations. So it's the child, parents, and grandparents. And these records are all on Family Search website. They've all been digitalized by the Latter-day Saints. And then here shows you a map. So in Bukovina here, this part is under Ukraine, and then down here, this is under Romania. Whereas up here, this part is under Poland. So that's why if your family is up in this region or down in this region, you may be checking in another country. I had started to say that I had taken in a presentation recently, and what the guy with my family, there's Borshchuk, he said, don't limit yourself to only checking at the registry office in Borshchuk, because my great-grandfather, I don't have the record for their marriage, and I should have it. And I don't have the record for the birth of their first son. So what he said, when he went to Ukraine, the neighboring districts had the registry books.
Have you been to Santa?
Where?
Santa, because right on the very left,
Just up a bit.
just right, the very, very last one.
Oh,
There.
right there, right there.
Right there?
No, it's Santa, up,
Just to the left?
Yeah.
Right there.
No.
He's been the kids. Because I've read the book on Galicia, and Santa apparently has quite a museum.
Yeah.
So,
But this is where in Borshchuk, in the town of Borshchuk, a gentleman, a professor from the United States, numerous, like 30, 35 years ago, made a huge donation of millions of dollars to the town. And they've got the most incredible museum. And when you go in there, it starts with the Ice Age, then it's World War I, then it's World War II. Then if you're, I went there the first time and I didn't get let in at all. There was a garden, he just said me, no, and that was it. Then the second time I went in there, I got to see the front part. Then the third time I went there, the lady recognized me because I was asking for books. And she said, oh, you're the one from Canada. And so she said, would you like to see what's in the back? In the back is I held my breath the whole time I was in that room. So, and then afterwards I'm checking online and I find out upstairs they have a gallery because in July they have the Borshchuk and also their embroidery because they have the dark thread. They have in July a big festival celebrating the soup and the embroidery. And upstairs in the gallery, they have all these mannequins with all the costumes and that. So next trip I make, I have to go see the gallery. But this is where, I worry about in Ukraine is that there's these treasures of documents and artifacts and art in these small little museums. And, I just pray that the people are burying them, hiding them, protecting them. Because like I say, I saw stuff at the Shoe Museum that I just about passed out. I was so surprised. But this is the same. I grew up near Elk Point, and the Andershak, he owned the local mechanic shop. But he had one of those metal detectors. Years ago, before people even thought about it, he went out to Fort George site, and he gathered up all the old artifacts and everything like that. When he passed away, they had a huge auction online with all his collection and everything like that. But he was doing it in the 1950s and the early 1960s when nobody else was thinking about it. But he got all kinds, and see, somebody was lucky that made this donation to this archives early enough that they were able to go and gather a lot of really important information. So now we're going to get into IT tools. What I did was I thought, well, I'm going to ask IT on what they think genealogy research does. But it's very important to know, does not replace the need for a professional genealogist. There's a lot of hallucinations in that they make up stuff. So you have to watch that.
So how do you
It's
acquire a genuine genealogist? How would you know?
What do you mean?
If you want to hire a genealogist?
Oh, there is. I can give you information. There are people.
Like credible,
Yes,
I see.
there are. Like there's one gentleman, Ihor, out of Lviv, that has been doing it for about 20 years, and he doesn't. He's got on a website. He's got all the pictures taken of the different villages and stuff, and he goes to the archives. For me, 11 and a half pages typed on the Kalynchuks and Stetskos cost me $320. And so, and then there's another gentleman, there's
So how do you pay that by?
Western Union. Yeah.
That's the bank arranges all that?
Western Union
You
is
go to
business.
Walmart and places like that.
Yeah,
Oh,
they've got
I
booths
see.
set up in that. And as long as you've got their name and their phone number and their email address and that,
Oh,
and
okay.
you just do a transfer.
Like a wire or something?
Yeah. But here's something that I learned, is that I found this picture and I thought, oh, that's really cool. And then, of course, I knew that you got to check a little bit further and you have to check the source and you need to quote the source, right?
Yeah.
So I end up checking into it, and I know her. She happens to be the lead of the local DNA special interest group here in Edmonton. But what was interesting is that she's got, again, another AI tool that I didn't even know about. So later on, I'm going to check this one out to see what they can do. So one thing to start, like if you're wanting to know a little bit more about AI tools, they have ongoing webinars. They'll have them for free. Most of them are for free, but you don't get the syllabus. You pay like about $50 per year, and then you get full access. And then there's some of them that are only special, that only members can access. But this is one that happened in the beginning of January. And what was really cool, these guys are all the experts on AI and genealogy. Each of them has a slightly different slant. So for example, Blaine focuses a lot on DNA. And whereas Steve focuses a lot on language. And then Thomas focuses a lot on translations and transcripts. So each of them has their own stick. We just had at the beginning of March the Roots Tech. And last night I did a search and I got 191 hits. That's for videos, say, over the last 4 or 5 years that have the word AI in it. Again, YouTube has, all you have to do is type genealogy plus AI. And you can watch some videos. What I find is better to watch somebody actually doing something, and then I'm visual, so then it helps me to then go into the app and
To do it, yeah.
to do it, right? Here's an example with Heritage Family Tree webinars. This is for new members, and again, they're always adding more. And again, you'll see all the experts. There's Steve, there's Art, there's Thomas, Andrew, Diana, they're all, Andrew, they're all well-known people. And what's really cool is they're the ones that are investing a lot of time into genealogy tasks on new AI tools. And then they're sharing what they're finding. But they're the ones that are doing it like way up at this level. And what's great about most of the AI tools is they ask for feedback. So when you do what's called a prompt, which is making the inquiry, and then it gives you an answer, then it asks you, how did it do? So they're always, and then they'll even ask, do you want to save this? So if you save it, it goes back into the pool of knowledge. So what I did was, I went to ChatGPT and asked it, this is my inquiry. And again, what it showed was way more than I could think of on my own. You know? And so here, for example, AI is used behind the scenes on the two DNA sites. Initially, they didn't identify it as AI because people had this impression, robots, and they're going to take over the world. So actually, AI has been working for, say, the last 10 years or more. And it's been like slowly building up in kind of how much it's involved in our lives. And then here, all the top genealogy websites use it for different things, from doing matches to search engines. You know, and then giving you hints on possible documents, or even like on Ancestry, you'll get that little green leaf and it'll say potential relative or something. That's an AI that went and did a whole bunch of checking and said, I think this person's related to Elaine. And they'll put it up as a green leaf.
So when do you get excited when you get a DNA match? And it's like 0.7% or 1.2%, or of course you get 2.2%. When do you get excited that it's a real match?
Usually kind of the line is, I think, 30 centimorgans.
Yeah, 30 centimorgans are better, but I had this year, somebody matched me, I did my DNA, and somebody on my heritage matched me as low as 6 centimorgans. So you can match all the way down. The trick is to have a big family tree, and that the other person, and to go back about 7 generations.
So yeah, it all depends, and that's where like Kathy has been studying, taking a lot of courses on DNA and stuff, and there's a whole area in that with doing the analysis and stuff. And what's the exciting thing is you get AI tools to help you. So a lot of stuff that took a lot of time before to do mapping out and you know, color coding and putting in columns and to figure out, you know, if they're related on your mom's side or on your dad's side, and then which grandparent, which great-grandparent. Now, AI tools will do that for you. So like, for example, with me, on all my DNA, my mom has done it too. So that eliminates half of it, you know, so it matches to her DNA, and it splits all my DNA matches. And then here, like with historical record search engines, transcriptions, analysis. This is some of the cool stuff. If you have, say, you have a big box of old photos, and a bunch of them don't have names on the back of them. Scan all of them onto MyHeritage, and you can go onto one of their apps, their AI apps, and it'll match. What it'll do is it'll figure out the person's face, and it'll match who are all family members to that person, and then also that person over time. So, and it's even got an app where it can take somebody and make, I can put my picture in there and say, create me as I would have been in the 1800s in Galicia.
And Marilyn Monroe shows up.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then like here, I use a lot of this with the chat boxes. And for example, that I was working on, because I'm creating a database on the first wave of Ukrainian settlers to Alberta. So that's from 1891 through to 1914. And so one of the projects I was doing was locating Ukrainian Canadian books. And so I went into 3 of the chat boxes, and I'll show in a couple minutes of what kind of results I was getting. And what will happen is you'll use one app one day, and it'll work really good. Then the next time you go in there and you'll have no good luck, but you'll go to another one and you go, wow, that's great. So what I find is there's 3 main ones that I will use, and I check all of them. I don't just settle with one, because they each give you different results.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I'm on MyHeritage, and I found a lot of stuff on MyHeritage. However, if I want to check my family search, I think it is, I could put the name and exact date, birth, and all that information. Guess what? You click on, and nothing comes up. And you know that person exists, and you know that that's where they're from. So what am I doing wrong? Like, what is that?
You can show me later on the
Okay.
computer. And here's like another thing is with tree building. You can, an example is that on Chat GPS, if you have the paid version is about $20 a month. You can, on Ancestry, you have your profile of your ancestor, right? And then under hints, you can go and see other people who've done profiles on the same person. You can take each of them and save them as a PDF. Then up to 5 of them, you can upload them onto Chat GPS, and you can write instructions and say, compare these 5 profiles, list them in a table, and identify the discrepancies. And it'll do it within a couple minutes.
What
And
if
so-
what if he's a terrorist? That doesn't do
Well,
it.
every family's got a.
Oh, okay.
Wait till you come up.
Next.
But see, here again, Ricky Tree uses it a lot, and all, like I say, all the big companies are involved with genealogy. What is interesting is all of them at the bottom say here about can make mistakes. And so now it's increased, like a couple of years ago, it was probably like 30-40% were errors, like it was wild. Whereas now, when I was online with Roots Tech, they figure it's only about 10%. So you still got to check everything really thorough. But it's kind of the case is that the AI is trying to give you a complete story or all the information. So it happens to be missing this little piece. And it'll go, well, maybe the house was brown. So it'll fill in stuff. See, again, natural language processing, facial recognition, and again, DNA, genetic analysis. So now we'll talk about some of my experiences. Yes, DNA, or yeah, they hallucinate. They even admit it themselves. I started by using Google Translate, and I have it on my phone, so when I've gone out to the cemeteries and that with all the headstones that are in Ukraine, all I have to do is change it to camera mode, and it'll translate it. Yeah, and so
That's cool.
It
Yeah,
works for
that,
textbooks too.
Huh?
It works for textbooks
yeah,
too.
textbooks too. Yeah, and I'll do like paragraph by paragraph and just snap
Use
it.
two. I always find if I use two, because my Ukrainian is complete shite. So I use two different ones. Like I'll use a Google one, and then if you use a Microsoft, or use two different
Yeah.
ones. And then when I like hold it over, I screenshot both, and then I can usually, using like a Slovnek, I can put the actual accurate, because both of them are a little off
Yeah.
at times. But if you do it with two different formats of translating, you can usually figure it out pretty accurately.
Yeah, so like for example, when I was working a few months ago on that project of listing out on a table all the Ukrainian Canadian books, you know, from the first wave, both in English and in Ukrainian, I used 3 different apps to do it. And I found that each of them provide, one app was really good at identifying the books first, but again, it came up with some books that I could never find. So I don't know, like, they had the title and an author, but I've never, so I have a handful of them that I have no idea where they're from. And then what, just going back here, is that first thing to do is start with the free version. And you don't want to put any money out until you know if that's something you're going to be happy with. And also, with these tools, they're not a quick learn. So they say it takes an average of about 20 hours to get like a aha moment where you're actually using it. And I'll give it an example that with Dr. Taras's poster. Initially, I tried to do it in Chat GPT. Well, the first poster, I liked the background and everything. So what you do is you send it instructions, which is called a, I'm missing the word here. Prompt. So, and what it did was, under the free version, you only get 3 tries, and then it blocks you for 24 hours. And it made the first version, second version, third version were getting worse, steady worse. And it was like I was dealing with a 3-year-old child, you know. But it was me who wasn't giving the proper command to the app on what I wanted. So it was duplicating the title of the presentation 2 or 3 times on the page, and then it refused to add his picture, and it was wanting an old picture of somebody, and you know, like, it just wasn't working. But it just, like I say, it takes time to practice with them and to learn. And also the experts, they're posting their prompts, like the most common prompts that a lot of us doing family research would use. You can go online, and a lot of them on their websites and their blogs and that, they list them, and you can just copy them and save them and adapt them and use them for yourself. And also on the apps, you can, if you have a really good prompt that gave you some really good results and you want to use it again, you can save it. So here's an example when I was asking this question: search for Ukrainian Canadian books and list the source. And I went on 1, 2, 3. And here, Microsoft only gave me 3 books. Whereas this one, it gave me 9. This one gave me the most, it gave me 10. But it also included a brief description. But yet, when I did the second task where I took the actual name of the book and the author, this one worked the best. And something that would have taken weeks of my time to put together, I was able to do in about 2 hours using 3 AI programs. And then this is where I was saying about, I was trying to do a Zoom poster, 3 tries, kept duplicating the statements. I ended up going to Microsoft Word, downloaded a template, and used that. And then here, a while ago, a couple months ago, I was searching for Ukrainian Canadian genealogy resources. What shocked me was most of the information I got was 20 or more years old. So I don't know, some of you were doing family research back 20, 30 years ago, and there was a Lemko site. Well, it shows up today. because again, they're pulling old information. So what happens is with my blog, it's so popular that it's on the bottom of the first page of a Google search, but yet on the AI apps, it doesn't show up because it's only 3 years old. And then this is the one I told you that made me log in and verify who I was before it would help me. But it ended up like here, it says, it basically says my training data was as of October. And it says that it doesn't have the ability to search the web, which means it's not live. It's data that's been inputted, that it's getting information from. I cut it off here, so there was way more books listed. But what I liked was what it said at the end. Recommended checking these sources. Canadian Institute of Ukrainian Studies, that's here. University Library databases. Ukrainian Canadian Research and Document Center. Academic journals. And then it asks here if I would like more information. So again, the one that you may look at one and say it's asking for too much personal information, but it might be the give you the best results. So here, final takeaway. One thing to keep in mind is everything you post on social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, etc. like that, all that stuff is being fed into the AI tools.
Facial recognition and all.
Yeah, pictures, yeah, photos, all that. And so what people are doing is like, especially on Twitter, you can go in and you can set it where after 7 days it deletes your post. So it's only your current information, you know? And that's to think about. And part of how serious this is that at Roots Tech this year, Steve Little announced the new laptops that are coming out in 6 months, a year from now, are going back to where you store your data on your device and not on the cloud. And that again is because of AI data mining and also security concerns. So, but that means that with photos and that, just keep them on an external hard drive. And then a common misconception is about privacy concerns. Again, with all of them, they have to the left side, it'll ask you, do you want to save this? And especially if you're doing, like if I'm doing a search and in there, I include information about my mom is still alive. I'll say no. But again, if it's my great-grandparents, I'm okay to save it because I want to share any of the research findings that I have with anybody else who's making inquiries. But they've got set up where it'll ask you, do you want to save this, and different things. And about, people are concerned that AI will replace people. It'll replace some of the tasks and also time-consuming jobs that we do. This Facebook group is run by Blaine, and it's really good. It's, again, a lot of people from just the average person doing research to experts all sharing information together. And then this is Steve Little. And this, again with AI, this is for the language transformations, strong uses, summarizing. So you can if you have a online PDF of a book, you can upload it to one of these programs and you can say, give me a summary. Or search through it and find this name or this village name. Like you can ask for stuff, and rather than you flipping through the whole thing, standing and reading and trying to find something, all you have to do is is just upload it and put a prompt and ask the AI app to do it for you.
The
Again,
day's gonna come, we'll never have to leave the house.
and then also, like here again, pulling out facts from text. Generational, making it bigger. So say, even like for example, with the articles I post on my blogs, I'll put them through 1 or 2 AI apps and say, can you improve what I wrote? But what was funny last night was when I was doing this presentation, my Grammarly was fighting with the AI because the AI suggested one way, and Grammarly came along and said, no, that's not proper grammar. So again, translations are good. It does way better for typed. So like back when I had the proof of age document, the parts that are typed, that'll translate it over fine. When it comes into the handwritten, it'll be more of a struggle. And again, with the big companies, they focus on like the top 4 or 5 languages first. At some point, they will get to where they'll be doing Cyrillic and the other languages. And they're moving, like what they've done in the last 2 years compared to what they've done in the last 6 months. They're now at the point where they're just like really moving fast. So something that you may have looked at 6 months ago, you can go back today and it'll be totally different. And then here, like language related tasks. So again, anything with like charting out anything that you would be doing where you're comparing information, you can get it to do all that for you. It's weak on, again, doing research. And then transcriptions, again, it struggles with handwritten text, also with oral histories too because of accents. So and they're working on both the handwritten and oral recordings to do the transcripts. And a lot of that, for example, years ago with the census records, they were done by a bunch of volunteers. AI does it now. And so what the volunteers do is they double check and make corrections. So again, what it does is the work that they do is more valuable, right? And that's what a lot of the people are saying with these AI tools is it will take care of the part of our work that is kind of time consuming. And an example is years ago when I worked at Alberta Agriculture, that's when I got, when Twitter first came out. And I was doing environmental scanning and foresight, looking at emerging trends and issues around the world involving agriculture. When I tapped in to Twitter and got in contact with experts around the world doing the same work or doing better work than me, I cut my research time in half. What used to take me a full day to do, I was able to get done by noon, which then gave me time to take inquiries from my director, to create better reports, and to work on other projects. So that's the same thing with all of this with genealogy. A lot of this tasks that would be very time consuming for us to do, you can go in there and check these apps, and you'd be amazed at how much time they can save you. And then this is interesting, I got an email this morning from Steve giving me permission. And with that, you can text me, email me. This is for the Ukraine Genealogy Group, their Facebook page, and then this is with my blog.